Hi, I'm Dan. Thanks for tuning in to what's going on at Dimgaard this week. So, as you probably know if you follow the channel, I am preparing the next big adventure, the level 1 to 20 adventure. And as part of that, I'm running groups each week. And I try to pick things that happen that week that are interesting or important to D&D that are not frequent topics, at least, in the very good channels for DMs and players that I follow. And so this week, the thing that came up is TPK, total party kill. Had a TPK in one group. Technically, it wasn't a TPK because one player had a clone and another player managed to escape with like 4 hit points and run away. But it was a wipe, for sure. So it made me think, oh yeah, that's a significant thing. TPKs, when they occur, are monumental events in a campaign, and should be addressed. Should be a topic that we discuss. So the first thing we need to talk about is the difference in how TPKs as a part of the game in 5th edition compared to other editions. So if you go back to AD&D back in, prior to 2000-ish, it was presumed, like it was just an established fact that the DM could wipe a party any episode that they want to, any session where the DM is like, no, I've decided it's time to wipe this group and we'll start over. That was completely within their power to do so. And there was, there were even back then, even back in the 80s, they were like, no, I've got this God character that there's no way to DM. And Tomb of Horrors was a response to that, right? Tomb of Horrors, often considered the deadliest adventure in D&D history. It was just designed to show players, it's like, no, you think that you have a God character, but no, here you go. Make it through the Tomb of Horrors live. And it was, I don't know of many people who enjoyed Tomb of Horrors as a player. There were sadistic DMs who enjoyed Tomb of Horrors, but it was a Tomb of Horrors. Anyway, but then 3.5 came out, and there was a response, right? There was a different structure put into place, and so 3.5, which became Pathfinder, and then forked into 4th edition, comes out, and they're like, okay, we're going to have a very well-defined set of rules for encounter design, so that players understand that no, if the DM is following the rules, you can't do things like just write a blurb, 2-liner in there. Anyone who is a dwarf contracts dwarf phage and dies in the next round, right? Which you could do, like that was totally a part of like the previous AD&D and 2nd edition. You could do that if you wanted to. And he's like, well, what do you do about that? You don't play a dwarf, right? you don't like what happens to dwarves? Don't be a dwarf. Anyway, but 3.5 said, no, we're not going to do that. We have this very well-designed set of encounter difficulty scaling and have a very well-designed CR system for the monsters that you could face, so that you understand that if you have a very well-designed PC that you are playing effectively, it's going to be very difficult under the rules. Now, rogue DMs would break the rules sometimes, but under the rules, if you have a well-designed PC that you're playing effectively, it's going to be very difficult to kill that PC within the rules, let alone a TPK. Right? And so you had then this population of players evolve who's like, oh, okay, I'm going to make very well-designed, effective characters. And that's where I was part of that population, by the way. So I'm not disparaging that population. I was part of it. It was very interesting for us. We like to sit down and theory craft, PC design and optimization. And it was a very fun part of the game for us. We would be called munchkins, sometimes min-maxers, power gamers, at times even rules lawyers, because that that style of character design is very dependent upon knowing the rules very well, so that you understand how to build characters within the rules that are going to be overly powdered. So then you saw a reaction to that. It's like, because you had then a group of adventure designers and DMs who are like, no, I think I understand the rules well enough and see the resources at my control as the adventure builder, that I can still engineer deadly adventures. And so you had a population of Munchkin DMs evolve, or Munchkin adventure designers. That was whenever I began preparing or publishing adventures. It was in 3.5. And so you had this amongst the D&D population, you had these two groups, the Munchkin adventure designers, the Munchkin PCs, who had their own sort of thing going, their own competitive thing going. And it was fun for them. I had numerous players during that time, come up to me at conventions like, oh, I saw where you wrote this module. I know to bring my best game. I know to bring my best player. It's going to be deadly, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, all my adventures are deadly. It's just the way I design adventures. So that happened. It was not bad for the game. It was balanced and fair, and it was interesting and entertaining for the participants. And so that carried in to 4th edition. It was the same thing. And then whenever 5th edition came out, like many people who had that history, I was expecting it to continue into 5th edition. But as I sat down to design 5th edition adventures, and I was like, okay, what can I do here to really ramp up the difficulty level on these? I realized immediately that no, 5th edition is not balanced and fair and fun. It is so heavily skewed towards the adventure designer, the DM, that an educated, an educated and inclined DM or adventure designer can engineer a TPK every single session. Every single session. Now, I know that there are people who disagree with that. It's like, no, I still think if I have these well-designed characters that, and I'm just telling you, you're just factually incorrect, right? I'll give you a specific example of what I'm talking about. So in the NPC section of the monster manual, there's at the beginning, under the rules, it describes how to customize those NPCs, because there are elements of them that are non-specific. So one of them is their race. They're all any race, gladiator, any race, acolyte, any race. And it says to customize them, add a race. And when you add a race, take the racial traits, apply it to the NPC, and that will 100%, rules as written, does not change the CR. All right, so what's the most elemental, like the baseline NPC we have back there? It's the commoner. CR 0, any race, 10 XP. We'll drop a human variant on there. And what's the racial traits for human variant? They get an extra skill, and they get a feat. All right, so we will drop on magic initiate as our feat. And we will give them magic missile, firebolt, and then one other random wizard cantrip, prestidigitation, whatever. So now we have a CR 0, 10 XP creature that's going to deliver magic missile and then firebolt, first 3 rounds of combat. And a CR 0. So if you do the encounter scaling, for a first level character, that is an easy encounter. Sometimes it could be medium depending upon your party size, but 2 of those is going to be an easy to medium encounter. At 16th level, 17th level, you're looking at 30 of those is going to be a easy encounter. So good luck with that. Good luck with being your 16th level PC facing 30 magic missiles the first round of combat, right? That's 90 D4 plus 90 damage first round of combat, doesn't miss. You say, well, I'll just throw up shield. Okay, well, so you can look at the encounter build or the CR guidelines. Say, well, I'm gonna drop on a spell rot tattoo of dispel magic. Okay, so they incoming 30 magic missiles. I throw up shield. Okay, so instead of the second one being a magic missile, he's going to activate his spell rot tattoo of dispel magic. Now you only have to survive 28 more magic missiles. Yeah, good luck with that. You say, well, I'll just make sure that everybody has a brooch of shielding. Okay, that's cool. Now then, let's switch those magic missiles to dissonant whispers. So now you're not facing 90d4 plus 90. Instead, you're facing 100. No, you're facing 90d6 of psychic damage, save for half. Yeah, so not quite as bad. Yeah, make sure everybody has brooch of shielding. You're only facing 90d6 of psychic damage, save for half. Good luck with that. And that's what I'm talking about. If you know what you're doing, you don't have to try real hard to TPK a party. And that's why it is not supposed to happen. In 5th edition, whenever a TPK happens, something has gone terribly wrong, right? Either the designer, and I've been guilty of this, I have designed bad encounters that resulted in TPKs. I thought, whenever I was setting it up, I thought, no, this seems fair. This seems like a reasonable challenge. So I'm not sure how they will get through it, but it seems like an interesting, reasonable encounter. That's pretty common for my initial playtesting. Is I'm not sure what the PCs are going to do with this, but this is a reasonable encounter, and against reasonable opponents. I'm really interested to see what they're going to do. That's actually quite fun for me. And there have been times, usually, not a lot, like in the course of a 40 session campaign that goes from 1st to 20th level, there might be a couple of times where I show up and it's like, oh, okay, that was not a good design. That's going to result in a TPK way too much, and I've got to redesign that. That's the reason we play test. So that's one thing that can go wrong, is as the encounter can be poorly designed by the DM. The other thing that can go wrong is, so particularly in Dimgaard, we want things to be hard. We want this to be we're building a heroic story. And the premise of a heroic story is that the heroes are going to be facing death at every turn. Every turn, it's like this. Every episode is a knife's edge, right, between success and failure. That's what we're building for. That's what our real goal is in Dimgaard. That's a real difference for people who come into Dimgaard games. They're used to things being much more mellow. Because if you look at some of the widely played campaigns, they are not designed to be knife's edge campaigns, right? They're not. Like Adventure League is designed like by design, and this is a good thing. I'm not criticizing it. Adventure League is meant to be a nice smooth pathway for new players, and you don't want those players to come in with out of strong knowledge of the game and strong knowledge of character development and just get wiped over and over again. So they are designed to have a very high level of survivability. I played a lot of Adventure League. There's never been an instance, not only of a TPK, but I've never had in a game where I had a player playing, like where I had the PC. There's never been a case where there was a permanent death. By permanent, I mean past the end of the adventure. We were able to. There's never been one that couldn't be revivified or avoided. And yeah, so that doesn't happen in Dimgaard, right? So it's a big adjustment for new PCs, for new players bringing PCs into Dimgaard, because at the end of a Dimgaard adventure, there are going to have been multiple PCs who were unconscious at some point. Often, once you get past 6th level, there are going to be PCs who are dead at some point, because we presume that Revivify will be available. And the reason we can presume that is we make sure that it is, right? Like in Dimgaard, just make sure that Revivify is available, because these things are really, really hard, and because we want when the session is done, when the players are telling the story of the session, we want that to be a memory that is like, oh man, that was so hard, it was so close, but we won, and we won because we did really good things, right? So that's what we're looking for in Dimgaard. Well, when you're designing on that knife's edge, if you have a series of bad die rolls, right? The randomization, if the variance kicks in, you can slip off the wrong side of that knife's edge pretty easy. And so when you're designing in that capacity, it is incumbent to have built into the cake, like baked into the cake, part of the secret sauce, is we want to have mechanisms to recover on those, 1 in 10, 1 in 20 sessions when we slide off the wrong side of the knife's edge. It's like we don't want that to be the end of the story. We don't want things to fall apart. So the typical thing we do in Dimgaard is we use the heroes, they have a support system. They have allies and friends. And if things go horribly, horribly wrong, those friends can rescue the bodies or negotiate ransoms or those type of things to recover so that the story can rehab and go on. And then if we have a particularly problematic session, so this past week in designing this, so here was the TPK. There's a college. College is doing these dangerous experiments that threaten the fabric of the cosmos. They have to be stopped before they do things that literally destroy the balance of the cosmos, and the whole multiverse goes whacked. So 16th level PCs go in to stop that. And so the student body, as well as the professors, they're really into this research. They're extremely dedicated to it. They're going to protect that. So as the PCs are moving through the college towards the research facility, the student bodies, a bunch of these apprentice wizards, little CR1/4 creatures, NPCs from Volos, they start accumulating around. So you get more and more of them. You have this horde. And then once they realize, oh my God, they're going to stop our very important research, the stuff that we've dedicated our lives to, then they are going to engage them in combat. Well, so that gets back to the same situation I was talking about with the commoners. You got these CR1/4 creatures. They have 2 first level wizard spell slots and 3 cantrips. So bang, bang, bang things. And so within the encounter design, there are mechanisms that the PCs can do to break up because it ends up being something like 15 apprentice wizards per PC. So that's 45 plus 45 magic missiles. The first 2 per so that doesn't but the PCs didn't do any of that. The PCs is like, they're just a bunch of little CR1/4 kids because they're college students. I just describe them and say, they look like they're like 18, 19 years old. Looks like they're students at the college, and they're like, okay, we're gonna threaten them, scare them off, and whenever they don't get scared off, then they're like, okay, well, I guess we have to kill all this, and then boom, stuff blows up. That's what generated the TPK. But going into that, I'm looking at that, and I'm like, okay, this could go quite badly. So I had special mechanisms in place in case it did. So in particular, the allies of the PC. So in Dimgaard, magic, particularly powerful magic, has got to be done secretly. It can't be done in open. So allies of the PCs over the previous months of downtime had created clones for them that came to maturity right before this episode, so that if there was a PC death, they weren't left there. So as long as they could recover their equipment, everything would be able to rehab. And that's what I mean by you need to have a foresight, an awareness, and a compassion for your players and the story. Like you need to embrace that and protect that. That is the precious thing about D&D, particularly in 5th edition. So The final thing that I want to bring up about TPKs, and not just TPKs, but deaths in general. So my experience in Dimgaard in 5th edition is that PC death, is traumatic for the player, right? And in particular, it can sour the player for that character. And I know that some people are like, no, once you create your character, you've got to carry it to fruition. I do not recommend. If you have a player death, that is a good chance for a player, or if you have a PC death, that's a good chance for the player to build a new character, one that they are is like, okay, that I didn't like the way that character played. I'm going to do something different, and that's what I really recommend is to give that option to players whenever you have a PC. Now, a lot of times, if you built the story well and it's not, particularly if it's not a poorly designed character, players are like, no, I'll take the raised dead, rehab it, and then we'll continue with this character. But I do like to give the option to rebuild a character if the player is unhappy with that PC, and I do urge that. So I don't know if I'm like TPKs are traumatic, important, and don't come up a lot. So if you have a TPK experience that you've learned something from or that is interesting, please share that in the comments. I know I would be interested in it, and I'm going to assume that anyone else who listens this far into the video would as well. So please do that. If you found this to be interesting and helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel. That definitely helps us. And then, as always, I always like to close by inviting you to engage me in any of the different social media channels that I'm active in when you see me there. Facebook, Twitter, Discord, Reddit, wherever we are. If you see me there and you engage me, it's going to be a thrill for me. I love talking about D&D, and that's always an entertaining thing for me. So again, thanks for checking in on Dimgaard, and I will have the next topic in a few days.